Imagine a murder suspect vanishing from local custody before he's even booked, snatched out of a hospital bed by federal agents in the middle of the night. Hi everyone, I'm Joel Chorny, Tucson trial lawyer and former public defender. Today we're unpacking the tug of war over Julio Aguirre, a case that has local prosecutors and federal agents pointing fingers at each other. But before I get into that, a quick disclaimer. This video is for general information, it's not legal advice. If you're facing charges, you should talk to a qualified attorney. On July 10th, Tucson police say that Aguirre, a Mexican citizen previously deported, held multiple people at gunpoint, attempted several robberies, and fatally shot 69-year-old Ricky E. Miller, Sr. during an attempted carjacking. A dog took him down, and officers rushed him to the hospital. Under the normal playbook, Tucson police guard a hospitalized suspect 24/7. Once the doctors clear them for release, deputies cuff transport them to the Pima County Adult Detention Center, where they are photographed, fingerprinted, and formally booked on a first-degree murder complaint. And within 24 hours, they appear before a judge, the bail is argued, victims get automatic notification, and the prosecutors lock down their evidence chain. That entire sequence evaporated in the middle of the night when U.S. Marshals and Homeland Security agents walked into the hospital ward, signed a custody receipt, and drove Julio Aguirre miles in the opposite direction to the federal detention center in Florence before local officers even printed the booking packet. Pima County Attorney Laura Conover blasted the midnight handoff as alarming and wildly abnormal, adding that her team's homicide case was gutted because he was never in the sheriff's custody. Instead, in the dark of night, he was taken by federal agents. In the United States, we live with dual sovereignty. A crime can violate Arizona law and federal law at the same time. So two different sovereigns may prosecute without violating the double jeopardy clause. The Supreme Court reaffirmed this idea in Gamble v. United States back in 2019. In theory, the order is simple. One court finishes, then the other picks up the baton, and each sentence may run back to back or overlap. Real life, of course, is never that neat. Prosecutors follow the Department of Justice's internal petite policy, which says the later sovereign should back off unless it can show a substantial federal interest that the first case left unaddressed. That policy is flexible. It's not a rule of law, so turf fights like Aguirre's still do erupt. Meanwhile, the state's speedy trial clock keeps ticking. If Pima County cannot arraign Aguirre within 48 hours of booking and cannot bring him to trial within the statutory deadline, judges can dismiss or at least slash the charges. And then you have to add the human factor. Elderly witnesses may forget details, move away, or pass on. Physical evidence can degrade. Victims are forced to wait, sometimes for years, before telling their story in an Arizona courtroom. Each delay erodes the state's case, even if on paper, dual prosecution remains quote-unquote available. Aguirre could serve federal time first and still face state murder charges later, but by then the prosecution might rest on faded memories and brittle evidence. Hardly the swift accountability that most communities expect from our criminal system. On the federal side, the indictment zooms in on 3 counts: the fatal carjacking, the gun, and Aguirre's return after deportation. It is a streamlined story about interstate crime and immigration status designed for one courtroom. Pima County's draft complaint is much broader. It starts with first-degree murder, then stacks every robbery attempt and assault so that all 7 victims, most of them in their 70s, have their moment in court. Conover's argument is straightforward. Washington is telling a single chapter, but Tucson needs the whole book. If the state never files its case, those missing chapters may never be heard by a jury, and local victims will lose their voice in our criminal system. Pima County's top prosecutor says the overnight custody grab sabotages her case on 3 levels. First, with Aguirre locked in a federal facility 2 counties away, her team can't question him or bring him to local hearings, so arraignment is stalled and the state's timeline is frozen. Second, it delays justice for elderly victims who deserve their day in court while they're still able to participate. And third, if the federal case wraps up and ICE deports Aguirre before Arizona even gets to try him, the state may lose its chance at a murder conviction entirely. Conover calls the move a political stunt aimed at quote-unquote scoring points about undocumented immigrants rather than protecting public safety. The U.S. Attorney's Office counters that the federal charges are also serious and reflect, quote, a significant federal interest. The translation is that the carjacking that ends in death is squarely within federal statutes, especially when interstate commerce and firearms come into play. They declined a media sparring match but made it clear they're keeping him for now. So, what we can expect is perhaps the state will seek a writ of habeas ad prosecundum, where Pima County can petition a federal judge for a writ under 28 U.S.C. 2241, asking the U.S. Marshals to loan Aguirre for arraignment in any state hearings. The Marshal Service's own guidance notes that federal prisoners may be transferred to local authorities when a state writ is issued, precisely to expedite local prosecutions at reduced cost. Federal prosecutors could oppose the writ, arguing security or significant federal interest, but courts usually grant it absent a compelling reason otherwise, because comedy favors letting each sovereign move its case forward. Then there's also the situation with victims' rights enforcement. Arizona's Victims' Bill of Rights guarantees victims, quote, prompt and final conclusion of the case and the right to be present and heard at each critical stage. This comes from Article 2, Section 2.1, A3, and A10 of the Arizona Constitution. Conover can file a special action petition in state court asserting that federal custody is violating those constitutional rights. She could ask for a show cause order compelling the feds to produce Aguirre, or at minimum to schedule joint proceedings so elderly witnesses aren't left waiting years to testify. You can also expect there to be plea jockeying and the petite policy chess game. Under the DOJ's petite policy, federal prosecutors generally avoid a second trial if there has already been a substantial state conviction, and vice versa. That means whichever side cuts the first plea or wins the first verdict often locks in forum control. The later sovereign must justify any follow-up prosecution as serving a substantial federal interest. This reminds me of the situation with Jerry Loeffner, who shot Gabby Giffords back in, I believe that was 2008, and also shot and killed Judge Roll of the federal court. In that case, both the feds and the state wanted to prosecute and were very eager to do so. The feds got the first bite at the apple and gave him, I believe, multiple life sentences. And at that point, the state really had no compelling interest to prosecute further because he was already put away for the rest of his life. What we can expect is for both teams to dangle offers. On the federal angle, we can expect a single life max carjacking count with possible parole in place concessions on the immigration side. With the state angle, could be a stacked murder and armed robbery counts, but perhaps parole eligibility sooner than federal life. Defense counsel will shop whichever deal best mitigates exposure, and that decision will ripple into whether local victims ever see a state courtroom. This dust-up underscores a deeper tension. Should homicide cases involving non-citizens default to local courts where community harm occurred, or to federal court where immigration and interstate factors loom large? We've seen turf fights like this before, but pulling a suspect pre-booking is practically unheard of in Arizona. From a defense point of view, dual prosecutions raise thorny Fifth Amendment questions, even though Gamble says they pass constitutional muster. In Arizona, a standing concern is that ICE will seize an undocumented defendant the moment state custody loosens. I have counseled dozens, probably hundreds of clients with ICE detainers that if they post bond, federal agents are waiting at the jail door. National practice guides warn the same thing. When a client with a detainer makes bail or is released on recognizance, ICE can take immediate custody, leaving the criminal charges to languish and forcing the person to fight removal from another facility. Missed hearings then trigger bench warrants and bond forfeiture. Some detainees decide they would rather be deported quickly than face decades in an Arizona prison, while others want their day in our criminal system. The Aguirre tug-of-war proves those fears are well-founded. By spiriting him to Florence, the feds signaled they are willing to derail local homicide cases to hit aggressive removal targets. ICE leadership is currently asking Congress for funds that would double detention capacity to 100,000 beds. The same memo talks about deporting 1 million people in a single year. There is no credible public safety rationale for blocking Pima County's murder prosecution, only a drive to pad deportation statistics. Meanwhile, victims wait, witnesses scatter, and the search for truth inside Arizona's courts takes a backseat to a quota sheet in Washington. I'm going to keep my eye on whether or not Laura Conover files that writ and how a federal judge responds. I'm also curious to see if the sheds will share evidence or play keep away, whether the deportation looms if the federal case wraps up quickly, and how local media will frame the story. Is this a policy debate or a political football? So what do you think? Should the feds step back and let Pima County prosecute, or does federal interest trump local concerns here? Drop your thoughts below, hit like and subscribe for more breakdowns of high-stakes cases in our criminal system. I'm Joel Chorny. Remember, you have rights, they matter, protect them, be safe, and I'll see you in the next video.